Silvio Dante's day-to-day job description inspires the same confidence as any family business balance sheet. Everyone insists it's perfectly clear, nobody can point to a neat organizational chart, and yet the money reliably migrates upward with remarkable discipline. The confusion usually begins with the inevitable comparison to Tom Hagen, an explicitly credentialed, visibly professional consigliere whose work reads as law, contracts, diplomacy, and conflict management. Silvio does not arrive with a law degree or a courtroom-adjacent resume. He arrives with a stare that lowers the room temperature and a presence that makes arguments suddenly feel like a bad investment. And still, he sits beside the boss like the one piece of office equipment nobody dares unplug. The conclusion that he must be just advising misses the point. In this kind of hierarchy, the most valuable work is designed to look like it barely exists. Silvio is not nothing. He is the insulation layer, the operational buffer, the administrative choke point, and the enforcement backstop, an executive function packaged as a man who appears allergic to theatrics. A consigliere role in practice is less a ceremonial title and more a set of responsibilities that revolve around proximity. Proximity to the boss, to sensitive information, to decision timing, and to the ability to prevent the boss from wasting time on petty disputes dressed up as emergencies. He is the person who converts chaos into actionable summaries, keeps minor squabbles from becoming public spectacles, and ensures that the boss's time is spent on strategy rather than on listening to grown men narrate their feelings as if they were quarterly reports. In other words, he does not need a visible entourage to have reach. His reach is embedded in process. He knows which conflicts matter, which insults are expensive, which payments are late, which subordinate is about to do something catastrophically impulsive, and which business opportunity is really a liability wearing a smile. That is the job. Keep revenue predictable. Keep problems contained. Keep the boss insulated from the grime of collection and grievance. And keep the organization functional enough that it doesn't collapse under the weight of its own egos. Of course, none of this stops the recurring insistence that Silvio must be just a talker, because he is not constantly shown leading a formal crew in the way certain personalities insist leadership must be performed. That assumption confuses visibility with control. Silvio does not need to announce authority. His authority is implied by how quickly people adjust their tone when he speaks. He is a senior operator, a human switchboard who routes problems to outcomes. He has money on the street. He is connected to lending and collections as part of the broader revenue ecosystem, and he is trusted with responsibilities that only go to someone who can be counted on to execute the boss's interests without turning every decision into a referendum on pride. The advice he gives is not philosophical, it is operational. Who needs pressure? Who needs reassurance? Who needs to be redirected? And what needs to be done so the boss can remain above the mess while still benefiting from the results? The Bada Bing is the other half of the answer that people keep pretending is a footnote. Running a club is not a hobby. It is infrastructure, and it is work. The legitimate kind and the decidedly not legitimate kind. Because a cash-heavy venue is an ideal hub for revenue, favors, access, and plausible paperwork. On the legitimate side alone, it is an endless grind of staffing, scheduling, vendors, compliance headaches, and the kind of managerial tedium that makes people romanticize simpler times, even as they actively ruin everything around them. On the illegitimate side, it provides a convenient storefront for cash flow, informal lending, arrangements, and the gentle miracle of money becoming difficult to trace once it has been filtered through enough hands and receipts. The club also functions as a social lever. It is a place where people can be approached, influenced, and reminded that obligations exist, without a public confrontation or the need for the boss to show up personally. When someone insists Silvio is merely kicking up like a standard subordinate, it ignores the fact that he controls a hub that generates cash, absorbs cash, disguises cash, and creates leverage. Whether he is directly involved in lending or facilitating it through others is almost beside the point. The structure is what matters. The club is not just a revenue stream, it is a control surface. This explains why he can seem everywhere and nowhere at once. He is doing management, triage, and enforcement by proxy, while the story understandably refuses to turn organized crime into a corporate training video. The work is intentionally framed as routine because, for him, it is routine. He survives as long as he does because he is dependable in the unglamorous ways. He listens without indulging nonsense. He speaks without advertising insecurity. He can deliver unpleasant truths without needing a monologue. He is a filter for bad ideas and a translator for volatile personalities. The boss does not need to hear every detail. The boss needs outcomes. And Silvio is the person who makes outcomes arrive in a clean envelope rather than as a long, self-pitying explanation. His professionalism, however, is not the warm, wholesome kind people like to pretend exists in morally complicated environments. It is colder than that. He is dollars and cents in human form, efficient, pragmatic, and capable of treating other people's crises as line items. That coldness is precisely why he is unsettling. Other figures may be loud, impulsive, or theatrically unstable. Silvio's danger is quieter. He is the type who can make a hard decision without needing to perform it. The absence of visible enjoyment is not reassurance. It is the problem. When consequences are delivered as procedure, the organization becomes terrifyingly sustainable. That said, the character is not a pure machine. There are moments where certain acts clearly sit badly, where he needs to regain composure, suggesting there is still a thin layer of human reaction underneath the practiced detachment. It is not redemption. It is evidence of compartmentalization. The conscience may protest, but the schedule does not change. This bleak competence makes his petty irritations more revealing than any speech. Silvio is often defined by what visibly sets him off: poor officiating at a youth sports game, being stuck with incompetence, losing at cards, being shouted at in cramped environments, missing an important game due to an obligation, loud or repetitive noises nearby, perceived disrespect, food-related annoyances, and the sort of minor disruptions that trigger an outsized disgust response. The repetition of these grievances is not accidental. It is the portrait. He can operate calmly in a world built on intimidation and coercion, yet becomes personally affronted by trivial breaches of comfort or etiquette. That is not inconsistency so much as diagnosis. His calm is not inner peace, it is discipline. And discipline, when paired with entitlement, produces a person who treats control as a moral right. The comedic contrast, moments of refined taste colliding with low behavior, the sudden fixation on cleanliness, the rigid insistence on order, works because it is true to the character. He is a manager of chaos who cannot tolerate chaos in his immediate vicinity. He can endure the big mess because it is business, but he cannot endure small messes because they feel like disrespect. That tells you everything. The recurring question of whether he would make a better boss than Tony is where this entire debate pretends to become philosophical while staying deliciously practical. The case in his favor is straightforward. Tony is emotionally reactive, personal feelings distort strategy, conflicts get escalated when they could be managed, and respect is chased as if it were oxygen. Silvio, by contrast, often appears controlled, pragmatic, and less vulnerable to mood-based decision-making. He knows when to stay quiet, which in their ecosystem is not good manners, but survival. He can assess without dramatizing. He can correct without grandstanding. He looks like the ideal second in command, stable, disciplined, and able to keep the machine running while others audition for attention. But the counter-argument is what makes the character interesting. The qualities that make someone an excellent number two do not necessarily make them capable of carrying the symbolic and psychological burden of being the boss. Top leadership in this world is not about competence alone. It is about absorbing pressure, projecting inevitability, and making final calls while everyone watches for weakness. Brief periods of elevated responsibility suggest that Silvio can coordinate and execute, but the constant weight of being the final authority is corrosive. The ecosystem responds to uncertainty like a predator responds to blood in the water. People who behave under a dominant, volatile boss may test boundaries under an acting boss, not because the acting boss is inept, but because the organization senses that the myth at the top is temporarily thinner. Silvio's strength is operational stability. The boss's job is operational stability plus myth management. That myth is expensive. Then there is trust, the one currency everyone claims to value and everyone spends recklessly. Silvio inspires fear and respect, but those are not the same as loyalty, and loyalty is not the same as affection. His cold practicality makes him reliable, and it also makes him someone people treat as transactional. He can appear supportive while still ensuring that help keeps others dependent. He can be dutiful while still protecting his own interests. This is not a unique moral failing, so much as the logical outcome of an environment that rewards discreet opportunism. The editorial point is simple. When someone is exceptionally good at running the machinery, it is rarely because they are secretly gentle. It is because they understand incentives, leverage, and consequences better than the people who confuse noise with power. Discussion of his later fate often drifts into the desire for tidy closure, and the story's refusal to provide it is part of the design. An unambiguous ending would be too clean, too comforting, too much like a moral fable. Instead, his incapacitation and prolonged uncertainty operate as a thematic statement. In this world, outcomes are frequently messy, drawn out, and humiliating, rather than dramatically conclusive. The man who lived by control is reduced to the ultimate loss of control, and the organization around him does what it always does, recalculates, reassigns, and keeps moving. Speculation about his future becomes less about literal prediction and more about wishful accounting. Retreat somewhere quiet, disappear into anonymity, reinvent himself in a place far from the noise, perhaps in some distant, orderly country that functions as a symbolic exit from the chaos. The recurring fantasy of Norway, or any similarly distant refuge, is not about geography. It is about moral distance, the desire to imagine a character defined by pragmatic cruelty, escaping the consequences of the ecosystem he helped maintain. But consequences are not sentimental, and the practical realities in his world are suffocating. Legal pressure, shifting alliances, and the temptation for compromised insiders to save themselves by selling out others all hang over everyone in leadership roles. In that scenario, being active and visible is a liability, and being absent through distance, incapacity, or disappearance can perversely look like the safest form of silence. Even the question of who owns the club once he is out of commission reveals how futile and absurd their sense of entitlement is. There are no clean inheritance rules, only power, leverage, and the willingness to enforce claims. If he is alive but unable to act, the asset becomes a contested object, squeezed by opportunists and protected by whoever can still project strength. That is how these systems behave when a key operator is removed. The machinery does not stop. It grinds louder. Silvio's character also attracts a layer of humor. Jokes about alternate identities, melodramatic reinventions, and exaggerated myths, because the story itself thrives on the contrast between brutality and banality. He can be discussed with a wink, and then, moments later, with genuine discomfort, because he embodies the central contradiction. A man capable of calm efficiency in ugly business, yet also strangely fragile about minor irritations, manners, and sensory annoyances. The result is a portrait that is both darkly funny and quietly indicting. The final verdict is not that Silvio is mysterious or undefined, nor that his work is absent because it is not constantly narrated. His work is absent because, in any operation that wants to survive, the most important labor is designed to be invisible. A boss who personally handles every dispute is not a boss. He is a frantic middle manager with delusions of grandeur. Silvio's value is that he prevents that humiliation for the boss. He keeps the revenue disciplined, the conflicts contained, and the organizational nonsense filtered into something actionable. He is also the living argument that composure is not virtue when it is merely a refined delivery mechanism for coercion. His calm is impressive, right up until it becomes clear that the calm is what makes him dangerous. It allows hard outcomes to be pursued without hesitation, without spectacle, and without the inconvenience of introspection. And yet he remains unmistakably human in the most revealing ways. Petty, controlling, easily disgusted, quick to take offense, and perpetually burdened by the fact that his colleagues cannot behave like adults for more than a few minutes at a time. If that sounds like a bleak assessment, it is. It is also the point. Silvio Dante is not the charismatic star, not the tragic romantic, not the loud tyrant. He is the indispensable operator, effective enough to be trusted near the top, petty enough to be credible, and ultimately vulnerable to the same truth that consumes everyone in that ecosystem. The machine does not love its parts, and it does not grant clean endings to the people who keep it running. Subscribe for more.